From childhood, we've been told to listen to our elders. But what if that elder is so ancient that its voice has been silent for 9,000 years? Imagine a bone, sleeping in silence for an eternity until science finally awakened it. When scientists read its DNA, human history began to crumble, like an ancient map kept folded too long. Origins blurred, boundaries erased. And if one ancient skeleton can rewrite everything we thought was true, how many more secrets are buried beneath our feet right now, this very second? Stay tuned, because what you're about to learn will make you question everything you've ever read in history books. And be sure to subscribe and like the channel so you don't miss other incredible stories that science has tried to hide from us for decades. The summer of 1996 was hot and noisy along the Columbia River. The air vibrated with the roar of engines and the cheers of the crowd. Not far from the town of Kennewick, Washington, a thrilling hydroplane race was underway. Boats cut through the water at breakneck speed, leaving behind foam trails that shimmered in every shade of white and blue in the sun. Spectators lined the shore, some bringing folding chairs and coolers filled with drinks, others simply standing, shielding their eyes from the sun with their hands, watching this aquatic ballet of speed and power. Two young men, eager for a better view, decided to wade right into the water. The river was shallow near the shore, the water pleasantly cooling their hot feet. And from here, the view of the race was simply stunning. Will Thomas, a local college student, slowly waded through the muddy bottom, feeling the small pebbles and sand slide beneath his bare feet. Just then, his foot struck something unusual. At first, he thought it was just a large rock, but the texture was strange. Too smooth, too round, too regular. Curiosity got the better of him. Will leaned down, dipped his hand into the murky water, and felt the object. When he brought it to the surface, for the first few seconds, he actually thought he was holding an unusual river rock. But as the water drained and the dirt began to wash away, his heart skipped a beat. What he held in his hands was definitely not a rock. It was a human skull. Empty eye sockets stared back at him through the centuries. The teeth were still there, though some were missing. The bone was dark, stained by the river's minerals, but the shape was unmistakable. Will almost dropped the skull back into the water in shock. His friend, standing nearby, froze, his mouth open. The roar of the race suddenly seemed distant and unreal, as if coming from another world. The atmosphere changed instantly. The joy evaporated. The adrenaline from the spectacle gave way to the adrenaline of horror and excitement at the unexpected discovery. The young men immediately got out of the water and called the police. The noise of the race continued, but for them, everything had stopped. They had just found a dead man, or what was left of him. When local police arrived, their first thought was predictable and grim. The Columbia River had claimed many lives over the years. Accidents, suicides, and sometimes murders. Bodies floated to the surface, found by fishermen or passers-by. It was a sad but familiar story. The officers cordoned off the area with yellow tape and began standard procedures. All signs pointed to a recent crime, possibly murder, possibly an accident. Either way, this was a job for forensic scientists. But everything changed when James Chatters, a forensic anthropologist, arrived on the scene. Chatters was a seasoned specialist, a man who could decipher the life and death of bones as easily as you might read a newspaper over breakfast. As he picked up the skull and began examining it, his eyebrows slowly rose. Something was wrong, or rather, something was completely different from what he expected. First, the bone was too heavy, too mineralized, This happens when remains lie in soil or water for a very long time, sometimes centuries. Second, the color. A dark brown, almost black hue, indicating prolonged contact with minerals. Third, and most bizarre of all, the shape of the skull. Chatters had seen thousands of skulls in his quarry, and this one looked unusual. Long, narrow, with a prominent chin and sloping forehead. It didn't resemble the typical skull of a modern Native American. Chatter felt a shiver of professional excitement run down his spine. He realized he was holding something far more interesting than the victim of a recent crime. It was something ancient, perhaps very ancient. In the following days, a team of archaeologists and anthropologists meticulously examined the discovery site. They worked slowly and methodically, sifting river silt through fine sieves, carefully excavating the bank. And gradually, bone by bone, a complete skeleton began to emerge from the earth. It was painstaking work, requiring patience and precision. Each find was photographed, and the bones were measured and cataloged. Each bone fragment was a precious testimony to the past. What they discovered was astonishing. Before them lay the nearly complete skeleton of an adult male. Judging by the pelvic and skull bones, it was definitely a man. Based on the length of the femurs, they calculated that he had been about 173 centimeters tall in life, a fairly tall height for the time. But the most interesting thing wasn't the size, but what the bones revealed about his life. This man clearly hadn't died in bed of old age. His bones bore the scars of a brutal, dangerous life. His ribs bore traces of a healed fracture. One of the arm bones had also once broken and healed, but not quite correctly, leaving a slight deformity. But the most astonishing discovery was what was found in the right pelvic bone. Deep within the bone, almost completely covered by bone tissue, sat a stone arrowhead. This wasn't a fragment or a stray pebble. It was a skillfully crafted spearhead or dart head made of stone. Someone had once thrown this weapon with such force that it pierced the skin and muscle and embedded itself in the pelvic bone. And most incredible of all, this man survived. The bone around the spearhead showed clear signs of healing. The body was attempting to isolate the foreign object, growing new bone around it. This meant the man had lived for months, perhaps years, after the injury. He walked with this stone fragment inside him, likely experiencing pain with every step, but he continued to live, hunt, and perhaps even fight again. Chatters carefully removed the spearhead and sent it off for analysis. Experts determined it was a so-called cascade spearhead, a type of weapon used by ancient hunters thousands of years ago. This discovery confirmed Chatter's suspicions. The skeleton was indeed very old, but the real shock was yet to come. When Chatters examined the skull in more detail, he encountered a puzzle that haunted him. The shape of the skull was completely atypical for Native Americans. The long, narrow skull, the prominent chin, the relatively low cheekbones, all these features were more reminiscent of Polynesian or even European skulls. It was strange, and very disturbing, because it called into question everything scientists thought they knew about the peopling of the Americas. To get a definitive answer, they needed to determine the age. A small bone sample was sent to the University of California for radiocarbon dating. Everyone waited patiently for the results. When the results finally came, they were stunning. The skeleton was dated to between 9,300 and 9,600 years ago. Read that again. 9,500 years old. This man lived and died on the banks of the Columbia River, when the pyramids of Egypt weren't even planned, when Stonehenge was just a grassy mound, when most of humanity still lived in caves and hunted mammoths. He was one of the oldest and most complete human remains ever found in North America. But age wasn't the only problem. The shape of the skull remained a mystery. According to all the textbooks, all the accepted theories, the people who lived in America 9,000 years ago should have looked like the ancestors of modern Native Americans. But this skull said otherwise. It defied everything considered established fact. The find went far beyond a simple archaeological discovery. It touched on identity, history, the very essence of who we are and where we came from. This man's life, full of pain, struggle, and survival, spoke of incredible fortitude. His silent skull asked questions that demanded answers. Who was he? Where did his people come from? How did they get to this continent so long ago? And the most troubling question of all, what happened to them? But before science could answer these questions, war broke out. And not just a metaphorical war of ideas, but a real legal battle that would last nearly 20 years. When news of the skeleton's age became public, the reaction was swift and categorical. 5 different Native American tribes united in an unprecedented alliance. The Umatilla, Yakima, Nez Perce, Wanapum, and Colville tribes filed a joint claim under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, known as NAGPRA. This law was passed in 1990 with the noble goal of protecting Native American burial sites and returning the remains of their ancestors to their respective tribes. For too long, museums and universities had kept thousands of Native American skeletons in their collections, often without any consent or respect for cultural traditions. NAGPRA was designed to correct this historical injustice. The tribes demanded the immediate return of the remains. They called him ancient, with respect and reverence. According to their oral traditions, their people had lived in the Columbia River Basin since time immemorial. For them, this skeleton was not a scientific specimen, not a puzzle to be solved, but an ancestor. He was part of their land, their history, their blood. They insisted that he be returned to the earth with honor, dignity, and in accordance with their traditions. The land where the skeleton was found belonged to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Upon receiving the tribe's demand, the Corps quickly decided to side with them. All scientific research was immediately halted. No further testing, no analysis. The remains had to be prepared for reburial. But then scientists stepped in. A group of 8 eminent anthropologists and archaeologists, among them the most respected names in American archaeology, filed a lawsuit in federal court, attempting to stop the transfer of the remains. Their arguments were simple but compelling. How could this individual be linked to modern tribes without scientific study? They pointed to key facts. The shape of the skull was inconsistent with modern Native Americans. The age was extreme. And most importantly, no DNA analysis had been conducted. Without this proof, they claimed, it was impossible to confirm a direct genetic link. The scientists did not intend to be disrespectful. They were driven by a desire for truth and understanding. They feared that burying the remains without study would deprive humanity of invaluable information about who the first inhabitants of America were. They wanted to know who this man really was. They wanted to learn from him. The case quickly gained national notoriety. The legal battle dragged on for nearly a decade. During this time, the remains were kept in a sealed museum vault. He became known throughout the world as Kennewick Man. Scientists could not touch him. No further research was permitted. Tribes held ceremonies and continued to demand his return. The press followed every turn of the case. It turned into a fierce debate about what is more important, science or faith, knowledge or tradition, past or present. Both sides had compelling arguments. Scientists defended their right to knowledge and research. Tribes defended their right to respect for their culture, traditions, and sacred rights. This was more than a dispute over bones. It was a battle over who controlled the past. In 2004, after years of litigation, a judge ruled. He sided with the scientists, ruling that a cultural connection between the skeleton and modern tribes had not been convincingly established. The remains could not be released at that time. But even after the court's decision, research remained extremely limited. Scientists were bound by strict rules. Every test required approval. Every sample had to be substantiated. There was no room for error. And most importantly, DNA analysis, which could have definitively resolved the question of ancestry, was still prohibited. The bones were considered too valuable, and the methods of the time too destructive. So the secret of Kennewick man's genetic history remained locked in his ancient bones. The years passed. The silence continued. But the world was changing. Technology advanced. And while the remains lay untouched, new methods were being developed that would soon change everything. A breakthrough occurred in 2015, almost 20 years after the initial discovery. DNA technology had achieved incredible precision and sensitivity. Scientists could now extract genetic material from tiny bone samples without causing significant damage. A door, long closed, had finally been opened. A team of researchers, led by geneticist Eske Willerslev of the University of Copenhagen, working in collaboration with the University of Chicago, requested permission to re-examine the ancient remains. Their goal was clear: to conduct a complete genetic analysis of Kennewick man. After lengthy discussions and reviews, permission was finally granted. The scientists were provided with only a tiny fragment of bone from Kennewick man's arm. This tiny piece carried an enormous weight of expectation. The team handled it with the utmost care, as if it were the most fragile treasure on Earth. In sterile, spotlessly clean labs, they handled the bone, fearing it might crumble with the slightest misstep. The fragment was over 9,000 years old. Any mistake could lead to irreparable damage or contamination of the sample. They planned to analyze two types of DNA. The first was mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down through the maternal line and can reveal information about ancient migrations. The second was nuclear DNA, which contains a person's complete genetic information. By analyzing both types, they hope to settle the debate once and for all. Ancient DNA is incredibly fragile. Over time, it disintegrates into tiny fragments. Modern DNA can easily contaminate it. All it takes is a single skin cell from a scientist, a single hair, a single drop of sweat. Every action had to be meticulously controlled. Every breath, every touch, every surface. The work, it required patience, concentration, and respect. This wasn't just science. It was almost a sacred rite. They were working with the remains of a man who lived, loved, suffered, and died thousands of years ago. A man whose story had been forgotten by everyone except the earth that held his bones. After the genetic sequence was compiled, the scientists compared the results with DNA databases of various populations around the world. They looked for matches, patterns, connections, and what they discovered shook the scientific world to its core. The result was unequivocal and irrefutable. Kennewick man was Native American. The mitochondrial DNA of the ancient man from the Columbia River Basin belonged to the D4H3A haplogroup, found exclusively in indigenous peoples of the Americas. He was definitely not European. He was not Polynesian. He was Native American, without a shadow of a doubt. But the story didn't end there. Upon deeper analysis, the researchers made a surprising discovery. Kennewick man's genetic lineage did not match the modern Pacific Northwest tribes that initially claimed him. Instead, his DNA revealed closer ties to Native American populations of Central and South America, as well as some plateau tribes. The results revealed a complex and unexpected picture. A complete genetic analysis revealed something revolutionary. Kennewick man possessed incredibly ancient genetic characteristics. His lineage diverged from other Native American groups shortly after the initial arrival of humans in the Americas. His people belonged to one of the earliest waves of migrants to the continent. This discovery completely changed perspective. For years, people had puzzled and debated the unusual structure of his skull. Many thought he belonged to a different group because of his elongated head and protruding chin. But DNA analysis revealed that these physical traits did not indicate a separate origin, but rather an ancient one. The first Native Americans looked different from modern Native Americans. Physical characteristics have changed over millennia. Broader faces, distinctive cheekbones, and other recognizable features developed gradually through adaptation, genetic drift, and possibly admixture with subsequent waves of migrants. Kennewick man and his people were genetically Native Americans, but they exhibited distinct physical differences because they belonged to an earlier era of human development. Their appearance resembled the ancient Asian populations that initially migrated to the Americas. But this did not mean they were outsiders. It meant they were founders. Many have long held to the simplified idea that the Native American migration occurred through a single group crossing the Bering Land Bridge. But this new discovery reveals a much more complex and multi-layered history, shattering the previously accepted simple explanation. There were numerous waves of migration at different times. Populations fluctuated, declined, and then increased again. Long periods of isolation were followed by contact and admixture. Bodies adapted. Facial features evolved. Cultures developed over millennia. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come, and it will force you to rethink everything you thought you knew about ancient America. Even though DNA analysis revealed the origins of Kennewick man, the story wasn't over. A deeper dive into his genetic makeup revealed a disturbing detail that initially escaped attention. Researchers eager to unravel the core mystery nearly missed this hidden secret. Hidden within his genetic code was an anomaly. Scientists discovered a distinct element in Kennewick man's DNA when compared to modern Native American groups. This element was subtle yet perceptible, indicating the genetic imprint of a now extinct ancient population. This signature suggested the presence of a group that flourished in ancient America but has since disappeared, leaving no living descendants. The human genome functions as a vast repository of ancestral memories. Each group that contributes to a person's lineage leaves a unique imprint, like inherited fingerprints engraved in DNA. By deciphering these genetic patterns, researchers can uncover human origins and analyze the mixing of different populations. Modern Native American communities possess genetic markers that can be traced back to early populations in northern Eurasia and East Asia. These diverse groups interbred in Siberia centuries ago before migrating to Alaska and eventually settling the Americas. This story has been extensively researched and is widely accepted in the scientific community. However, the DNA of Kennewick man contained an additional element. An unknown genetic component was identified, distinct from all modern populations. Its antiquity surpassed that of other populations, representing a unique and unusual characteristic. This anomaly was not the result of modern human intervention or pollution. It appeared repeatedly in specific chromosomal regions, and its composition demonstrated clear genetic continuity. This element remained constant, consistent, and undoubtedly genuine. The researchers assigned this mysterious lineage a temporary designation, calling it Population Y. Population Y is currently unrelated to any extant group. However, it was clearly a factor in the genetic makeup of Kennewick man. A thorough study revealed that this unidentified population constituted approximately 2 to 4% of his total ancestry. While this percentage may seem minimal, it is significant in a genetic context. It is not just statistical noise, it is a real signal. Then came the most disturbing part. The distinctive marker of population Y was most prominent in the oldest genomes. As researchers studied later Native American populations, the signal became less pronounced. In modern Native Americans, the signal had almost completely disappeared. This indicated that population Y did not persist as a distinct group. Something unexpected had happened to them. Perhaps they had gone extinct entirely. Perhaps they had merged with other communities through intermarriage to such an extent that their distinct identity had dissolved. Or perhaps a more extreme event had erased their presence from the genetic record. Genetic material provides no direct answers. It only points to their disappearance. A particularly troubling hypothesis attracted attention. It suggested that population Y may have been the very first inhabitants of the Americas, arriving on the continent many millennia before the ancestors of today's Native Americans. These early settlers flourished and spread across the land long before their existence was documented in history. Later, approximately 15,000 years ago, a significant wave of migration occurred across the Bering Land Bridge. The new arrivals did not enter empty territory. Based on genetic evidence, they came into contact with population Y. The two groups interacted, interbred, and coexisted, at least temporarily. And then population Y disappeared. Their DNA indicates that they did not persist as a distinct lineage. With each generation, their genetic influence diminished. Some factors led to their exclusion from the history of existing humans. This discovery raised a subtle but troubling question. What happened to them? Did they slowly interbreed with the new arrivals until they disappeared completely? Were they displaced and forced to seek refuge in inhospitable places? Or did they perish due to disease, war, or deprivation? Genetic data cannot answer these questions directly, but they can hint. And the hints are troubling. The pattern of population Y's extinction suggests not gradual admixture, but rather a sharp decline. Their genetic signal doesn't decay slowly over millennia. It plummets in a relatively short period of time. This could indicate a catastrophic event, perhaps a disease epidemic to which they had no immunity, perhaps a series of conflicts with more numerous or better organized groups, perhaps climate change that destroyed their food sources, or, most alarmingly, perhaps deliberate extermination. Human history is replete with examples of one group replacing another. Sometimes this happens peacefully, through intermarriage and cultural assimilation, but often it occurs through conflict, displacement, and violence. The ancient world was no peaceful paradise. It was a world of limited resources, harsh conditions, and fierce competition for survival. If population Y were indeed here first, they controlled the best hunting grounds, the best fishing spots, the best shelters. When new groups arrived, perhaps more numerous and with better technology, conflict was inevitable. And in such conflicts, it's not always the fairest or the most honorable that wins. It's the strongest, the most numerous, the most ruthless that wins. We will never know for sure what happened to population Y. Their voices are forever silenced. Their stories are lost. Their culture is gone. All that remains of them is a faint genetic whisper in the bones of a man who died 9,500 years ago. But this whisper tells us something important. It tells us that the story of the peopling of the Americas was far more complex, darker, and more tragic than we thought. It wasn't a simple story of people crossing a bridge and settling an empty continent. It was a story of multiple migrations, encounters between groups, conflicts, interbreeding, and disappearances. The discovery of Kennewick Man has forced researchers to people were confronted with evidence that had been ignored for decades. The traditional story of early human settlement in the Americas seemed simple and straightforward for a long time. It was ingrained, repeated, and rarely questioned. According to this traditional view, humans migrated from Siberia across the Bering Land Bridge approximately 15,000 years ago. They followed large animals such as mammoths and bison across an ice-free corridor. They then rapidly spread across the region, eventually reaching the southernmost point of South America in just a couple of thousand years. The theory, known as Clovis the Fir, gained prominence, named after the unique stone tools known as Clovis points, which have been discovered in numerous sites across North America. These tools were long believed to represent the earliest inhabitants of the Americas, creating a narrative that was widely accepted and comforting to many. Then came Kennewick Man. He was difficult to fit into a simple timeline due to his advanced age and unique characteristics. His age alone challenged established norms. His distinctive physical appearance raised further questions. Moreover, he wasn't the only problem for the conventional story. Archaeologists have made significant discoveries at various sites in the Americas over the past 3 decades that contradict the Clovis word theory. Monteverde in Chile stands out as one of the most prominent sites, with evidence indicating it dates back approximately 14,500 years. This discovery directly contradicts the idea that humans arrived only 15,000 years ago and quickly migrated south. Other sites have heightened concerns about the narrative. Florida, Texas, and Oregon all point to human activity from an earlier time period. Some clues indicate humans inhabited the Americas around 16,000 years ago, while other evidence hints at dates reaching 20,000 years or more. Each new discovery extended the historical timeline even further into the past. What added to the concern about these sites was not only their antiquity, but also the contents they contained. Many early sites did not display Clovis tools, but instead revealed a variety of stone tool types, diverse hunting methods, and distinctive lifestyles. These people did not appear to have had a uniform lifestyle, suggesting that several groups with distinct cultures coexisted in the Americas simultaneously. Some groups were separated by significant distances. It is possible that some groups were separated by many generations. This did not resemble a simple migration followed by a single culture. Instead, it seemed complex, multifaceted, and deeply human. Another concept began to gain traction, eventually becoming known as the coastal migration theory. Recent findings suggest that the first inhabitants of the Americas may not have traveled through an ice corridor as previously thought. It is now believed that they followed the Pacific coast, possibly using boats to cross from Asia to Alaska before continuing their migration south toward California and beyond. This hypothesis provides insight into the rapid colonization of South America and the abundance of archaeological sites along ancient coastlines. However, this theory had an unexpected twist. Boat navigation requires expertise in planning, navigation, and understanding the ocean. Historically, there has been skepticism about the idea that ancient people possessed such advanced maritime skills. The coastal migration theory has challenged researchers to rethink the capabilities of Paleolithic people. Kennewick Man fits seamlessly into this updated and more complex picture. He was discovered near the Columbia River, a vital waterway in the area. Rivers serve as important means of subsistence, providing food, transportation, and valuable materials. His community likely relied heavily on fishing rather than solely on land-based hunting. This lifestyle was well suited to a culture based near the coast or along rivers. His genetic uniqueness further strengthened this concept. His ancestry seemed consistent with a primitive group that migrated differently than later inland populations. Perhaps they traveled along bodies of water rather than across icy terrain. They may have settled earlier and adopted a lifestyle that eventually evolved or disappeared. Kennewick Man didn't destroy the past. He enriched it. The Kennewick Man case evolved from a scientific issue into a power struggle that lasted nearly 20 years. It became a struggle for control over narrative, remains, and the interpretation of history. Initially, it was simply archaeological evidence. I was a find, but it evolved into a modern conflict, fraught with anxiety and tension. Ultimately, the crux of the dispute did not revolve around a single skeleton, but focused on a broader issue. The focus was on the priority of physical evidence or cultural practices when they conflict. This fundamental question lurked subtly in the background of every legal decision, demonstration, and scientific publication. Following DNA analysis conducted in 2015, which established a genetic link between Kennewick Man and modern Native American communities, the government responded quickly. The results indicated a consistent lineage, leading to the final resolution of the protracted legal battle. By 2016, Congress passed a special law requiring the repatriation of the remains to a group of tribal entities. Kennewick Man was buried a year later, in 2017. The burial ceremony took place discreetly, somewhere along the Columbia River. The specific location was kept secret, and no indication of the burial site was given. The tribes called him ancient, returning him to the earth. Many people concluded that history had ended. However, for scientists, this was not the case. DNA testing provided a solution to the specific question. However, it led to numerous additional questions. The enigmatic population Y, mentioned in his genetic makeup, raised questions about their origins. The various physical characteristics of the earliest American skeletons raised curiosity about how populations evolved over time. Interest also arose in uncovering how many more ancient remains are being ignored for various reasons, such as fear, influence, or political motives. There are many inconvenient truths we must acknowledge. Ancient human remains have been discovered in various regions of America, briefly studied, and then removed. Spirit Caveman in Nevada is over 10,600 years old. In California, the Arlington Springs woman dates back approximately 13,000 years. The Lucia woman in Brazil lived approximately 11,500 years ago. All of these individuals share a similar fate. These ancient people have a unique appearance compared to later groups, and they possess a genetic link to modern Native Americans, along with an additional element no longer present in modern populations. The pattern is too striking to ignore. The first inhabitants of the Americas were not a homogeneous group, but rather a diverse mix of people with different physical characteristics and genetic backgrounds. They arrived at different points in time and adopted different ways of life. Some settled permanently, while others adapted or eventually disappeared. Discussing the diversity of early American ancestry is becoming increasingly complex. Any idea that challenges the traditional narrative is quickly criticized, labeled risky, disrespectful, or harmful. Even inquiries from the scientific community are viewed with suspicion and perceived as potential threats. Now there's silence. This wasn't a deliberate cover-up. This wasn't a confidential secret meeting. Instead, it was a collective choice to sidestep certain inquiries, to stop pursuing certain directions, to ignore certain aspects of history for fear of disturbing revelations. The epic story of one of humanity's most remarkable expeditions remains shrouded in silence. The Kennewick Man DNA didn't just change one part of the story. It indicated that the entire narrative needs to be rethought. The concept that all Native Americans descended from a single group, migrating in a single wave, lacks sufficient evidence to support it. The reality is far more complex. There were a series of movements of people from different places, different groups of people with their own unique tools and origins. The end results varied among these groups. Some populations flourished and evolved into modern nations. Meanwhile, other communities vanished entirely, leaving only a small genetic imprint. Population Y is one of those forgotten communities. Their culture is gone. Their language is gone. Their beliefs are extinct. Their identities are lost to us. Their lifestyles and fears remain mysteries. All that remains is a faint whisper in the skeletal remains of a person who died nearly 10,000 years ago. Researchers are deeply concerned about this understanding. If a population can disappear so completely that only their DNA remains, it makes you wonder what else has been forgotten. How many other groups have migrated to the Americas, thrived for generations, and then vanished without a trace in written history? Genetic data indicate that the Americas have witnessed at least 3 significant influxes of migrants, with potential for even greater numbers. With each wave came a fresh population, carrying unique genetic traits. When these new arrivals encountered existing inhabitants, their interactions were often marked by conflict rather than harmony. The past was harsh. Its formation was the result of hardship, migration, grief, and resilience. While some populations endured, others fell. This story may bring no consolation, but it is the story of humanity. The story of Kennewick Man is not just a story about bones. It is a story about us, about how we came here, about those who came before us, about forgotten peoples whose names we will never know, but whose blood may flow in our veins. It is a story that the past is more complex, darker, and more wondrous than we ever imagined. And this is a story we are only just beginning to tell. What do you think of Population Y? Could they have been the first Americans, erased from history by subsequent waves of migrants? Or is there another explanation for their disappearance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and share it with your friends interested in ancient history and the mysteries of the past. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss other incredible stories of discovery that turn our understanding of human history upside down. Every week, we reveal secrets left unexplained in textbooks and tell stories that will change your perspective on the past. And before you go, be sure to check out the other videos on the channel. We have captivating stories about ancient civilizations, mysterious artifacts, and scientific discoveries that challenge everything we thought we knew. The next video is already waiting for you, and it's no less amazing than the story you just heard. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next video.